As we continue to wait for any kind of update from the Marvel Cinematic Universe about their Blade movie, I decided to go back and watch the original Wesley Snipes Blade trilogy. Hi, my name's Zach, and today we are going to rank all three of the Blade films. Before we get started, I started this YouTube channel because I cannot watch a movie without needing to talk about it afterwards. If that sounds like you, you're in the right place. Consider hitting that subscribe button. And with that in mind, I want to have a conversation with you down in the comment section below. So comment your ranking of all three of Wesley Snipes' Blade films. Are you a fan of this franchise? Do any of them work for you? Do none of them work for you? With all that out of the way, let's get started with my last place at number 3. And I'm sure to no one's surprise, I got Blade Trinity in that slot. And for me, I'm late to the party. I actually just saw this trilogy for the first time this past year. So I had heard for years about Blade Trinity, how it was a disgrace to the Blade films, how it was just a disaster of a movie. In fact, the production of this is a notorious story. There are several eyewitnesses from the cast and crew that have said that Wesley Snipes was a total disaster and nightmare to work with on set.
We were in Vancouver, and Wesley Snipes was going crazy. He would only answer to the name Blade. You couldn't call him.
He would only answer to Blade.
The Blade, yeah. And after a while, he resorted to just give. He would communicate with Post-its that he would give to the director, and each one he would sign Blade.
He would only talk to the director with Post-it notes. He would go into his trailer and get high. He would refuse to shoot scenes. He wasn't a fan of the script. And this is directed and written this time by David S. Goyer, who worked and wrote on the rest of the Blade films. And when it comes to Blade Trinity, I don't think it's actually an awful movie. I think it's definitely an example, though, of bigger doesn't always mean better. Because what this film does that I think is a complete miscalculation and a big mistake that they decided to do, they went away from the first two films kind of gothic, underground feeling atmosphere that they set up for the world, and that made those early films stand out. And this feels much more like a standard, generic early 2000s film, where now Blade is out in the open. They're talking about him on talk shows. The public's aware of Blade. They're looking for Blade. They also surround Wesley Snipes with a bigger cast this time that does kind of distract from his star. Again, that may not be entirely put on the director at this time, because Wesley Snipes, as mentioned before, was not a cooperative person when it came to working on Blade Trinity. So there are several shots in the film where Wesley Snipes' face is not shown on camera. It's clearly a stand-in or a stunt double doing what Wesley Snipes clearly won't do as Blade. With the supporting cast, you've got Ryan Reynolds primarily joining the cast here, doing his Ryan Reynolds shtick, which in the film, I do think that Ryan Reynolds is having the most fun out of anybody in the film. I don't think a lot of his material is all that funny. His jokes don't hit every time, but he does bring the Ryan Reynolds charisma that we've come to expect from Ryan Reynolds that I do enjoy seeing on here. Another issue with Blade Trinity, though, is the story just got too convoluted. It got too big for itself, where now you've got Dracula, the fables of Dracula are coming into the Blade world, where Dracula's a real vampire, the first vampire. He's coming back. The vampires are trying to stop Blade once again. Meanwhile, you got Jessica Biel, Ryan Reynolds, and Wesley Snipes over here doing a bunch of stuff. It's just too much going on in this movie. None of it really cohesively comes together very well. So while I do think that when Wesley Snipes decided to come to the set, he was still really good as Blade, I do like the addition of Ryan Reynolds, even though a lot of his material doesn't really hit for me in this. The action's a big step down, though. You could tell that it's very choppy. The editing is very quick. It doesn't let you see what's going on like the earlier films would allow you to do. The martial arts here feels very lazy, not very well choreographed. So a lot of elements that were so enjoyable about Blade 1 and Blade 2, they're absent here, which while I don't think that Blade Trinity is an unwatchable film, I didn't hate myself while I was watching it. It also is clearly the weakest of the Blade films because it abandoned so much of what made those films great to begin with. But hey, at least this is the movie that we can thank for giving us Ryan Reynolds' Deadpool.
When were you first introduced to the character of Deadpool?
I was on a set. I was on the movie Blade Trinity. I played a character in that movie that I guess, resembles Wade Wilson in Deadpool. And a rival executive at another studio said, I saw a little piece of Blade, and you're Wade Wilson, you're Deadpool. And I didn't know at the time. This is in 2004. I didn't know who Deadpool was. And he said, trust me, if they ever make a movie about Deadpool, you're the only guy that can play Deadpool.
Our runner-up is going to be the very first Blade movie, which was a very innovative film for the comic book genre when it came out in the 90s, and you can definitely see why that still holds a place today, because what they were able to do with Blade, the things that I think work the best with Blade, besides just Wesley Snipes, who we'll talk about in a minute, but the martial arts, the Hong Kong martial arts style that they were integrating into films early on at this time, bringing that into the comic book genre was so innovative and unique at that time, and is still unique when you compare it to comic book movies today, which I think it's one of the elements that really makes the first Blade movies really stand out. Because you got Wesley Snipes in here who already knows how to do martial arts. They use that to their advantage. The hand-to-hand combat and action sequences are usually captured with nice wide shots. You can see everything that's going on. The choreography here is so quick and snappy, and a lot of the times you can tell that Wesley Snipes is the one who's actually doing a lot of the stunt work. On top of that, this movie also does a really great job of building out its world. The details that they add into this film with the vampires, how the vampire societies work, how underground it is to the rest of the world, how they operate, how they have what's called familiars, people working for them as they're not able to go out during the daylight. There's a lot of really unique and cool additions to the world that just makes it feel more fleshed out and makes it feel more realized. And on top of that, you've got a great cast here with Wesley Snipes as Blade, obviously. You can feel the passion that Wesley Snipes has in this film to be Blade, and he is loving every single second that he is in front of the camera. He brings so much charisma and coolness to the character whenever he's on screen, even when he's doing something that might be a little bit dorky for someone else to be doing. He's still able to pull it off with that cool aura that he just has as the character of Blade. Plus, you've got him paired up with Chris Christopherson as Whistler, Blade's partner, and I really like the dynamic that they set up between those two. There's a lot of character moments in the first Blade where you can see how Whistler is a father figure to Blade. In fact, just going into spoilers here at this point, when Whistler has to die, when Whistler has to kill himself, and Blade has to accept that, and he forces himself to look, and there's so much emotion in that one scene. Couple things that keep Blade from taking the #1 spot is I do feel like in the middle, in the second act of the film, it does meander, it does drag just a little bit. The villain of Frost, I never really got that invested into. I never really found him all that interesting. And while the last action sequence in the third act is full of some great martial arts choreography, it also has some pretty poor CGI and some pretty generic stuff going on there for the villain and the hero. So I really enjoy the first Blade movie. I can see why it is given the credit of paving the path for a lot of the comic book stuff that we get to enjoy today. So to give it its flowers, it still holds up incredibly well considering when it came out, and also is able to still stand out from the pack of comic book movies that we are flooded with today. But coming in at #1 is going to be Blade 2, and this movie is just flat out awesome. This movie is so much fun to watch. This time taking over the director's chair is Guillermo del Toro, and he just has a way of bringing creatures and creepy monster effects to life on the screen, to the fact that when you get to the Reapers, the new vampire mutants that are being introduced in this film, the practical effects and the creature work done on them just looks fantastic. The movie is also a more streamlined story where Blade has to team up with the vampires to take down these new threats of new vampires, the Reapers, that are both feeding on humans as well as vampires. And that just allows for this movie to be basically a non-stop action flick where we barely go 5 minutes in this movie without getting some incredible action sequence or fight going on between Blade and the Reapers, or Blade and the vampires. There's also some really creative and unique ways that they take out the vampires and take out the Reapers with some of Blade's technologies, the UV lights, the UV light bombs that they have here during the sewer chase in the tail end of the second act there. And while this movie doesn't have a lot of character moments like the first Blade does. In fact, it very much is just, this is Blade. He hates vampires. The vampires hate him. But there's a bigger threat that both the vampires and Blade have to team up for. So now they have to work together, as reluctant as both sides are, which does lead to some fun dynamics and moments between the vampires and Blade. Couple things I would say are Blade 2's weaknesses is the fact that there isn't much character moment. There doesn't really feel like Blade has much of a character arc in this film. And there's also a semi-romance that they set up between Blade and one of the vampires that for me kind of felt like it came out of nowhere, didn't have much development, and by the end of it, I really didn't care. But when it comes to just fun, great action movies with vampires and Blade hunting down vampires, it really doesn't get much better than Blade 2. There are so many bigger sequences than in the first film. I think the action in a lot of ways is shot better than in the first film. It also has more horrific moments as a vampire flick than the first film has. There's a lot of shots that Guillermo del Toro shoots where there's some really gruesome and brutal violence happening on screen that he does not pull back from, that he does not pull away from. Blade 2 is a very bloody movie. It earns its R rating because whenever it goes for the violence, it doesn't hold back from showing you the violence in a way that you can still pump your fist and just go, yeah, that was awesome. Is it the deepest story? No. Does it have the most character developments? No. Is it a lot of fun? Heck yeah. Is it the most fun I had watching a Blade film so far? Heck yeah. So for that reason, Blade 2 comes in as my #1 favorite Blade movie. What do you guys think of the Blade films? Do you enjoy them? How would you rank them? Comment down below. I'd love to see your ranking. If you enjoyed this video and like more content like it, I've actually got a playlist over there of Marvel rankings. You can check out more for the Daredevil seasons, the Spider-Man trilogies. I got Fantastic Four up in there, all in that playlist. And right down there, you can check out the latest video uploaded to the channel. Thank you guys so much, as always, for watching and hearing me out. Don't just watch movies, talk movies. I'll see you guys next time. Take care.